There we go. We are live now. We got the notification on our end. So welcome everybody. It is not Monday. You're not seeing things. You didn't lose a day along with like the hour of sleep that we lost this weekend.
Oh man.
But it is Tuesday nights with Ben Stowe, and we are doing
Yeah.
it on everybody's favorite day. I had to wear mine, my super pie,
I like
my
that.
super pie.
I like that.
Um, it's one of those things. We talked about it at school today, and one of the other math teachers sent me a meme, and I don't know if you've seen like the one where it's like the girl's like walking down the street like this, and there's a guy playing a trumpet like right behind her head, and above the little girl it says everybody else, and above the trumpeter, math teachers on Pi Day. So like we're just gonna ram it down your throat, and I take some offense to that. I take some offense to that. I
But
have
but
more
does the
fun in
shoe
it.
fit?
I
But
played
does
drums.
I did too. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah. We don't want to be associated with a brass instrument. We're drummers. Yeah.
No, well, no, I got to watch myself because my son plays low brass. But no, I
So unrelated but funny as heck. Of course, NLFX also has a full musical instrument division, and
mhm.
we sell supplies and accessories for brass and woodwinds and that sort of thing too. And Kat, who everybody loves, our marketing director. Many people have, many of our viewers have probably met Kat at a trade show, but everybody loves Kat. Kat asked our showroom manager, who's a fantastic musician himself, 20 years touring, whatever. Anyway, she asked him if he had French horn mutes for her niece. And I'm thinking, yeah, just chuck it. It's just mute it all the way. Anyway, sorry, French horn
The
players.
purpose of their hand. It's a French
Yeah,
horn. Like, isn't
exactly.
that
Just
isn't that
stick it
what
in
their
a
hand
little
does?
further. Yeah, just jam
Yeah,
that thing in there.
yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, not
Yeah.
to take you away from a sale, but sounds like a hand would work just as fine for a French horn.
Or a trash can.
Well, yeah.
I don't
And
know.
we lost like all that one viewer that happened to play
The
French
one
horn, or those
French horn
child
player
does.
is really cheesed off right now. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
You know,
sorry.
I
I'm
don't know.
sorry.
I don't know about you as a drummer, but I was in a drum and bugle corps, and we used to joke about, what's 500 woodwinds on the bottom of the ocean? A good start, So I love woodwinds though. I do. And anyway, it's just things we say when we're not smart enough to play them.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I will say, like, I was one of those drummers who, at least during high school and marching band, I was in the pit because I knew the keys from playing piano. So I was on xylophone, I was on marimba, like I was
Oh,
on,
sure.
and I got the lucky thing. Like everybody's out, in the middle of summer learning drill, and I'm inside in the air conditioning just learning my music, and that's the only thing I
I
had to do.
loved marching. There's nothing, I really, marching sideways at 160 beats per minute with a snare or a set of quads. I really enjoyed that actually. I very much loved field shows. So I don't know why, but yeah, something wrong with me. Then again, I worked a lot of ag jobs as a kid. So I was out, in the fields in the heat, picking rocks or kicking rocks or detasseling corn or, whatever, but walking beans. But yeah, no, I think from a drummer standpoint, there's two really important things, right? If you can't play good, play loud.
Hmm.
Yeah, and always win the race to the end of the song.
Absolutely,
Very important.
absolutely. If you're not first, you're last.
That's right. Yeah, who wants to be the first loser? Yeah, I'm not rushing. You just need to keep up.
Exactly, exactly. We set the beat, right? That's how that goes.
I tried to convince my band director that I didn't really win the argument. And here's a throwback. I've got this note in the corner of our live stream that says, this is being live streamed, and it basically says, you should be careful what you say. So I maybe should take heed of that advice, but why start now? You know, we had a really kind of regimental old school band director when I moved, and I moved away from sort of a hip cool band director where we had these awesome field shows, and I moved to this very regimented band director who just didn't align with my line of thinking, I guess. And he was very, very against hot sticks. Remember those hot sticks, the neon drumsticks, neon colored
Oh
drumsticks?
yeah.
He was very against those. So not only did I have hot sticks, I had a mismatched pair of different colors, and it drove him bananas. And
Oh,
it
I'm
was
sure.
great. He just drove him bonkers. And
I
then he
wonder
had
if we had the same band director, because ours kind of, we were allowed to tape our sticks, right? Because you're beating them up, you have to tape them. If not,
right.
they fall apart in a day. But yeah, it was white.
Yeah.
That was
No.
the color of the sticks, white.
Well, and I particularly enjoyed this in like symphonic band, where, we're all dressed nice and playing symphonic works, and he would try to hide and steal every pair he could find that I had, but I always kept a spare. I mean, I would even when in the days when I was living on my own, I'd moved out and ended up in the homeless shelter and that whole story. I would skip a meal to buy neon drumsticks. That's how committed I was to, you know, to this thing. But as bringing back all these fond memories have nothing to do with the show tonight, but the orchestra also needed a percussionist, and they came over to the band room and they said, "We need a percussionist for orchestra," and kind of all of us were like, "Not it." And one of the other percussionists, I was actually the only male percussionist in that band. So one of the female percussionists leaned over and was like, it's like literally 100% girls in orchestra. You would be the only guy in the room. And I'm like, I think she knew I needed all the help I can get. So I said, you know what? I'll do it. Actually, I'll be your percussionist for orchestra. Still never got a date, but whatever. So I mean,
What's that? It's not the last man on earth. It's the last man in the orchestra room.
yeah, and apparently it didn't matter. Like apparently, yeah, I mean, it might as well have been the last man on earth. So whatever. I'm like, whatever. Yeah.
But remember, there's a Garth Brooks song. I know you recently did some country stuff, but the Garth Brooks song, "Unanswered Prayers," because you have a wonderful wife, you have a wonderful family. Thankfully, because you never got a date with any of those orchestra people.
Yeah, let's go with that.
I'm going. I'm glad that my wife doesn't watch this, because my wife is an orchestra person. My wife plays violin and does it very well. Um,
My wife is also a drummer, so that worked out pretty good.
oh,
Not the one who told me to go to the orchestra. That my wife,
right.
yeah, we didn't meet till we're from different states. But anyway, yeah, I learned last week. Those who didn't see the show last week, I learned that I got to be really careful, because apparently, at some points, my wife can actually hear what I'm saying, and I don't think she thought we were live last week. I think she thought John and I were just talking before the show, as we often do. And I said something somewhat objectionable, and she came in to address it. So, viewers, if you haven't seen last week's show, it's a riot. If you wanna, yeah. Anyway, so
Mrs. Stowe is awesome, and we love her, and
she is.
she's allowed to crash the show anytime I'm in here that she wants.
You don't have to suck up to her. You're in Pennsylvania. She's not coming to Pennsylvania.
Yeah, it's still,
But
we
you're
like
right.
her.
She is really an extraordinary woman. I mean, it takes a special woman to be married to me. I think it takes a special woman to be married to anybody in this industry. It's the long hours and the travel and the irregular hours. And I just was very recently very honored to be on a podcast that a friend of mine who's a Grammy nominated singer songwriter I've worked with is a part of. And she said, "Would you please be on my podcast?" And I said, "Yeah." And they were asking about, office hours, and they said, "Is it a 9 to 5?" And I said, "Well, there's 2 9s and 2 5s on the clock. So you're going to hit one of them at some point, That's our job.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you know what? I think there's a few people that want to know about something related to some letters. I think it was Run DMC or something, maybe.
That's
Is that what we're talking today?
Great band. First CD I ever had, actually.
Really?
Now the first CD I bought was Def Leppard Hysteria, but the first
Okay.
CD I ever had was Run DMC. And it was a funny story, because the CD player that we bought was a demo unit from the store, because it was cheaper anyway, and it came with that CD in it. And we called the store, and they're like, just keep it. So it was fantastic.
There you go. I will say this before we actually get on to topic. I had a school dance last week. Played It's Tricky. These are high school kids, 6 to 12. They were singing it like you would have thought it was the hottest song they ever heard.
I
And
mean, honestly, good
impressed.
music never goes out of style,
No, but to those below the age of 18, that can be questionable.
Well, yeah,
what, you know,
maybe they don't know what style is, I mean,
exactly. They're still learning. They don't even know how to take a shower, half of them. So,
oh, oh yeah. I coached high school wrestling. That just brought back so
oh,
many. Yeah, I was like,
I'm
oh,
sorry. I'm sorry. Your nose just smelled things that shouldn't.
traumatized. The
Yeah.
PTSD. You know what? I threatened him with Mrs. Stowe. I said, look, if I get impetigo or some skin disease because you guys don't take a shower, I said, my wife's going to come in here and murder all of you. So, uh, anyway, yeah. So, anyway, yeah. So initials, I think we're supposed to be talking about DMX.
I I teach math. I forget how to spell. So
Words is hard, Dan. Words is
it
hard.
is. I don't word good.
Don't give your kids word problems then.
Yeah. Yeah,
Syntax matters.
absolutely. Absolutely. But supposedly, like, in all seriousness, though, with DMX, right? So it seems like lately there's been a lot of kind of, for lack of better terms, drifting away from the old tried and true cables. Now, obviously, there's places where the cables will always be the cables, and there's certain scenarios, obviously, where the cables are always 100% necessary.
They work pretty
However,
much 100% of the time.
right. But however, we're kind of going to talk more a little bit about wireless DMX is my
Mhm.
understanding here. So within that, let's assume for a second I say, Ben, I need to get started. Um, I don't know where to begin. I don't know where to begin in this process. Where would we where would we start?
Well, the first thing I would ask you, Dan, is do you have any fixtures that have wireless DMX on board currently? Because many fixtures now do come with some form of wireless DMX built in. And what the fixture it is will probably determine what the wireless DMX is, and when I say what the wireless DMX is, that's because there's not a standard. Unlike DMX, which is a standard, and that was the whole point of creating DMX back in 1991, was that we'd have a universal standard to control lights. Wireless DMX uses individual and proprietary protocols. So, sometimes you'll find like, excuse me, the Chevet DeFi, will only talk to other Chevet DeFi wireless protocols. Or you maybe find like an open source 2.4 gigahertz, and that will talk to other compatible fixtures, whereas in the professional production world, we often find WDMX, which is again proprietary but licensed by Wireless Solutions. So, many of my touring class moving heads have WDMX built in. My phaser has WDMX built in, and even though they're different brands, they will talk because the common link is WDMX. Chevet well sticks use WDMX, so you can get any WDMX transmitter would be compatible and you can talk to it. So I think that's the first question: is do you have anything that already has wireless DMX on board, and if so, what? Because we maybe want to stick within that ecosystem. But if you find yourself in the unique scenario where you're like, yes, I do, but maybe I've got well sticks and maybe I've got, Chevet DeFi, and even though they're both Chevet devices, they're not speaking the same language. What do I do? So then we have to kind of go down that road and figure out, what's the best way to make that work. And in some cases, it means having two transmitters. And then something we can dive into here in a little bit, which is really, really cool, actually, is the Chevet ILS, their new intelligent lighting system. People often think about that as a wireless protocol, but it is not. It is a control protocol separate from DMX. We'll dive into that in a little bit, maybe, and talk about that.
Okay. So definitely the first thing anybody needs to figure out is if you're going to go this route, what are you working with?
Yeah, and I think too, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but on that point too, is not only what fixtures do you have, but what do you want to do? If you're like, hey, I want this to work hundreds of feet away, rock solid, I'm going to say, okay, then the open source is not your thing. WDMX is the way to go. It uses advanced frequency hopping spread spectrum. It tends to be the most robust and reliable. I've seen it reliably work at 1,000 feet, 1,500 feet. So that's the second part of that equation. Sorry to interrupt you, but you know what? While you talk, I'm going to have some pie.
All right. So Ben, here's the question: as you're having your pie, because I think I saw the kind that is. Do you have a favorite flavor, a favorite choice to go to?
There aren't too many I don't like. The favorite, I think. Sorry, I just couldn't look at your pie shirt anymore, and it's making me hungry. So
Sorry, yeah.
yeah, you're a terrible influence on me.
It's actually got the digits of pi. It's harder to see,
Oh
but
wow! Oh, that's
yeah,
cool.
yeah.
I only know 3.1415926539589. I think.
You should have had it. I could have checked
Three
while you're
point one
doing
four
it.
one five nine two six five three nine five.
Nope. 535
Yeah, 535. Sorry,
897.
535. Yeah, yeah. Well, back to work. All right. So,
There went your career in
yeah.
NASA. But
Mm.
side note here, and I shared this with you before, but for everybody else, found out that NASA only uses 14 digits of pi for their calculations of millions and millions of miles of everything else. 14 digits of pi gets them down to a half of an inch being accurate. So we don't
So
need to know
for
100
cutting
digits of
custom
pi.
panels, if we go 8 digits, that's accurate enough. Okay, got it.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, good to know. We're accurate to the millionth of an inch. No, I forgot. Oh, favorite pie. Yeah, I was like, I forgot the question. Yeah. It's somewhat seasonal too, right? Like you can never really go wrong with an apple pie. I love cherry pie. I love peach pie. I like cream pies though too. Banana, coconut. I think probably the only one I don't like is pecan. And don't ask me why. I don't know why. Because I like pecans. I just don't like pecan pie.
Okay.
Pretty much anything goes. Pumpkin, of course, around the holidays. That's a must. I mean, it just.
I'm with you on the pecan though. I can't anything nuts. Leave it.
Yeah, I don't know.
Forget it.
It's weird. I don't know what it is. It's just, I mean, like I said, pretty much anything else, I'll eat it. I mean, there's a few legendary trips to. There's a restaurant not far from the. Well, actually, it's right by when Mobile Beat was at the Trop. There was like a pie shop just a block and a half over, and we made a lot of late night runs over there to get pie. So, I mean,
Tonight I'll try that one.
that's how I party in Vegas. Everybody else is going out to the clubs. I'm like getting some pie.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And probably a little bit cheaper than that drink that water that would have been at the club.
No doubt.
I don't know why.
What's your favorite? What's your favorite kind of pie, Dan?
I am an apple pie. That is my go-to. It has to have cinnamon in it to really kind of make it off
Now,
the
like
top.
standard apple
With
pie or like a Dutch
with
apple pie?
and now you're getting technical on me.
Hmm.
Um, I prefer more of the
I
crumb
know
than the
my pies.
crust. Yeah, I prefer more like the crumb crust than like the straight crust.
Okay.
Um, and yeah, I,
And
I
have
have
you ever
some
had it with
fond
like
memories.
cinnamon ice cream, like warmed up with some cinnamon ice cream?
Oh, there we
That's
go.
so good.
There we go. I teach my kids how to remember mode by saying that I like the ice cream more than the pie. So I want as much of the mode in pile of mode as I can. So yeah, I'm gonna lean more to the ice cream than I am the pie, but yeah, apple's the one. That would be my one go-to.
First time viewers are like, "What in the world are we watching? Like, what
So
is
we were learning
happening?"
about something with DJing. What they keep talking food and you know, yeah. This is what you get. Like, you think you're gonna get no. We're gonna sprinkle.
Like I
We're gonna
said last week, it's a free show, no refunds. So
yeah.
you don't
Well,
have
if
to
all we did
watch.
was talk technical jargon the whole night, like they'd be glassed over, and some of them, not others. Like I'm looking at some of the names in the chat, and definitely want to thank DJ Mikey Mike and Aaron the DJ and Simeon for checking us out tonight, and as well as anybody else that might be out in Facebook land. I can only see the names in
You know
YouTube.
what? Let's find out in case we make some more late night Vegas pie runs. But viewers, put your favorite pie in the comments.
There we go.
I want to know. I want to see who's got what. So I'll see if you're going
Yeah.
with me or not.
Chocolate peanut butter pie. There we go. There's another one that a little unusual. Like off the, it's not doesn't quite fit into that fruit piece that a lot of pies do.
Oh,
But
I'd do it though. I'd do
oh,
a chocolate
absolutely,
peanut. Yeah.
yeah. It takes them a while. There's like 30 seconds of delay. So
Yeah.
we'll be moving
Oh,
on
that's
to the next
okay.
thing. They'll suddenly answer it. Pie DMX, somebody says.
Yeah, pie deep. Yeah, they're like. I think that's a subtle hint. Get back on topic. Booked my
Oh
whole
my God.
Tuesday around hearing this show about DMX, and all I'm doing is learning about pie.
Coconut custard. They're starting to come in. Coconut custard. We've got really don't have a favorite. They love them all.
Who's
So
out? I'm
yeah.
going with them.
That would be Nathan. Nathan
It's a date. All right.
Rathmeyer. I totally
Oh yeah,
butchered your
yeah.
name, buddy. I'm
He's
sorry, man.
yep, my guy in Alabama, I think.
Okay. All righty.
It's
John Colley, DMX, easy as PI.
love John. Thanks for that. So
ABC pie. Apple. Oh, appleberry cherry. That's what ABC stands for.
oh,
Appleberry.
appleberry cherry, sure.
That's a complex pie right there.
You know, how is it they're making me hungry while I'm eating a pie? Like I'm literally eating a pie right now and I'm thinking about pie.
You're thinking about more pieces that you could have.
There's more in the kitchen. A couple different flavors out there. Yeah. I don't mess around on pie day.
No, nor should you ever.
No, there are some things that are just, you know, sacred. So
absolutely. All right, let's get back to the DMX. So we talked about figuring out some of the fixtures and that kind of thing. And so to put it in some perspective here, when you talk open source, like if somebody's not familiar with what that means, is that their brand? I mean, I hear the word open source, it makes me think of like open source code, like it's available to anybody.
Yeah, it's kind of is. And again, it's still proprietary-ish, but you'll find it, you know, in like Eternal Lighting used it, and some of the no-name Chinese lights use it, you know, because again, it's an open source communications. Now, Eternal also allows you to get WDMX on board their fixtures. So again, you kind of got their choice, you know. Yeah, there's just it's sort of the generic, if you will, but that doesn't mean that just because you bought two, we'll just say two Chinese uplights, that they're going to work together. It doesn't mean that's going to be the case, you know.
Yeah, they very well might be on a different setup within that. Like one might have this version, that one might have that version.
Well, that's the step too. Even within the open source, we found some we'll call it software versions, I guess, but some, you know, for whatever reason, it'll work intermittently, or it doesn't work reliably, or you know, it doesn't work like it should. And as part of the sound and lighting symposium, I've taken a spectrum analyzer actually, and measured what's happening when these DMX devices are communicating. I think that's really kind of an eye opener too. People are like, wow, you can, you know, sort of visualize the radio waves, as it were. I apologize again. I got a pie in my throat. Anyway, you know, you sort of see what's happening with these, you know, signal transmissions, and I think that helps to kind of understand. Okay, this is how it's, you know, 2.4 is not 2.4 is not 2.4. You know, Wi-Fi is 2.4, and even within Wi-Fi, we have lots of different standards, right? You know, 802.11a, 802.11b, going back, you know, ancient times, 802.11ac, you know, a little bit more modern, right? So, you know, these are somewhat intra-compatible Wi-Fi standards, you know, but then we have Bluetooth, which is also 2.4 gigahertz, and it's not going to communicate with it at all. You know, they're very different standards just because they're sharing a frequency range, right? So,
okay, so let's assume for a second that I'm not using some off-brand from another group. Like I've got Chavez Di-Fi, and let's say I have an ADJ fixture over here. I'm blanking. What's the name of
Wi-Fi, ADJ's Wi-Fi.
Thank you, Wi-Fi. So we have a Wi-Fi compatible fixture over here. I don't really, you know, I've got two.
Yeah, they won't talk to each other. So either you're going to have to get some compatible receivers to use with one. You're going to turn off the radio on one of them, and you're going to get receivers for them. You know, and each of these has receivers available. Chavez got their little DeFi dongles, and you can just plug it into a light. It's battery powered, very convenient, right? You know, ADJ's got their EXR Wi-Fi, and you know, so whatever your best option is, that's, you know, what you would make the prevailing wireless, and then you just turn off the radios on the ones that you're not going to use, so that it's receiving only on the compatible. Or you get two transmitters and you're transmitting two simultaneous wireless networks, and ensuring that they're not competing with each other for airspace. And usually you can, just like you would with a wireless mic, you can kind of pick a frequency, you know.
So I guess in that instance, then I'm not stuck right? I wouldn't necessarily have to buy the two fixtures because those are two transmitters. So like, let's assume for a second I bought them. I wasn't planning on doing wireless. Now I'm deciding to get into it, and suddenly I
Mhm.
go, oh, they're not compatible. There is that third tool, if you will, to plug into them
Mhm.
and do that. Which so is something like that, I'm assuming, would also be able to take my non-wireless
Correct.
DMX fixture and make it.
Yeah, which is really what it was intended for. I mean, that's obviously the intended purpose is to make something that's not wireless now wireless, but you can also use it to convert something that isn't compatible into something that is. Um, engineering is a series of compromises, and it's how we go about it is almost an individual discussion. I have these conversations with people, and in the real world, and you being a great customer yourself, call up and say, so here's what I want to do, and we say, okay, well, here's how you're going to do it, or here's what I would propose you do, right? But there isn't always right or wrong or hard and fast answers, and I think sometimes customers maybe wish I would give straighter answers, but many times my answers are questions,
Mhm.
is ultimately you're the one who's going to use the gear. So I want to make sure we get to a place that works for you. Um, I mean, I guess it would make it much easier if everybody would just do things my way, but I don't want to just impose my, way on everybody because it isn't really always the right way.
I still, it's funny you mentioned about like, I want to do this. I still remember, and I don't know if you remember this or not. The memory you have, you probably do. But oh my gosh, this has been a few years. This is going back a few years, maybe almost 10 at this point. But I wanted to be able to have a trussing with
Hmm.
moving heads on top, and I wanted to be able to run wireless basically to them. But at that point, those extra dongle pieces for plugging in were harder to come by, or you still had to plug them in. They weren't really battery powered, or if they were, I didn't know
Right.
about them.
Yep. Yeah.
Um, so we kind of had to figure something out. And through you and I kind of thinking through it, we got the idea of I was using my Eternals, which had a DMX out. So I
Hmm.
set my signal to my uplight in the bottom of my truss and then ran a cable up to my moving heads. And that alone just made me go, oh, this isn't as nasty as I'm thinking it's gonna be.
No, that makes perfect sense. And that's something I would suggest even today. Why get another receiver? Why spend the extra money and deal with the extra, effort to get a receiver for your moving light if it doesn't have it built in when 6 feet away or 8 feet away, you've got a wireless receiver, and the output of that wireless receiver is a DMX bus. We can now connect a wired string of fixtures, up to 31 fixtures, in the bus, and it's just the same as if it came out of a controller. So that can be a really great way. Um, we talk about like DMX splitters too. Well, wireless receivers can function basically like splitters. If you have two receivers, you now have a splitter, basically. So yeah, I think that's a great way to understand that the wireless and the wired DMX is ultimately the same. Once it comes out of that wireless receiver, it's DMX, and we can use it any way we want. We could put a wireless receiver on a truss and have a whole horizontal truss full of lights cabled to that one receiver.
Okay. So what, let's say I've got my transmitter, right? And I've
Hmm.
got this set up. Um, with microphones, we talk about, when we have a handheld receiver, stuff like that, we got the antennas, or I'm sorry, handheld transmitter, and we got the antennas on the receiver, and we talk about, line of sight and stuff like that.
Hmm.
I assume there's some of that same issue because we're still dealing with radio waves, right? Like,
100%.
is there a better, is it better for the transmitter to be high or for the receiver to be high
It was
if
better for
I'm
both to
setting
be
this up?
high.
For them both to be high. Okay.
I mean, because line of sight is the name of the game. Now we're talking about 2.4 is a much smaller wavelength than most of our wireless mics, which operate typically in UHF 470 to 614. Minus 608 to 614, but 616. We'll just call it 608. That little 2 megahertz slice nobody ever really uses anymore anyway. So uh, but yeah, so 2.4 is a much smaller wavelength. It's going to have much less ability to penetrate things, and it's going to not propagate as well through water or metal. A metal mesh where the gaps in the metal are smaller than the wavelength of the radio wave are essentially a solid surface as far as that radio wave is concerned. So, they don't propagate well through that. Um, so yeah, I think that obviously it's not practical to have line of sight when you've got uplights against a wall. You're gonna have people around, and the systems are somewhat engineered with that in mind. And these radio waves will bounce around a little bit, but if you want clear propagation, that's the best way to do it, is to make sure that there's nothing between the two transmit and receive. And here
There's
again,
something.
just to add before you ask that, is to say that the different signal topologies, WDMX is much better, and one of the reasons is the fact that it spreads its data out so much over the whole spectrum, that advanced frequency hopping spread spectrum. So any lost bits are happening at a faster rate than DMX refreshes, and thus you don't experience any jitters or lost data in the DMX signal.
Okay, so that's why you're getting about the fact that that has that better piece, because of how it goes out.
Yeah,
You mentioned about
significant
not
difference.
being penetrating. Just to make sure I'm understanding that, does that mean things where a microphone, we don't really notice an issue? DMX, if you put them in the exact same conditions, you might have an issue due to that lack of penetration. So that's something to think about. Like, so, because I could see some people go, well, I've got the two of them maybe not side by side, but I've got them
Yeah, don't do
basically in the
that. Don't
same.
put them side
Yeah,
by side, by the way.
yeah. But if I've got them in comparable locations, why is my mic going to be fine, but my wireless DMX is not? And so that kind of answers that. So when you're thinking about your placement, definitely want to keep that aspect to it. Or as we're kind of finding, that if you want to just make sure that no trouble, I shouldn't say no trouble, the least opportunity for trouble would be that WDMX.
Yeah, it's I mean, if you're going to go wireless, I mean, it's the best one out there, I think. And certainly, I haven't compared it in a head-to-head against things like Goddard and City Theatrical, but the other pro level wirelesses. But it's compared to like DFi or Wi-Fi or any of that. I mean, it's not even close. It's like a General Motors H3 versus an actual Hummer. One is truly weapons grade and the other one just looks like it.
Yeah.
One you would actually take into those conditions, and one you wouldn't. But something you said about the microphone, I want to go back to. That doesn't mean that your mic will work when the DMX won't. Sometimes you find the opposite, even though the mic probably, certainly has a longer wavelength and is able to penetrate more. There's other problems that mics experience. And one of those is that audio is real time. And there's no chance for a do-over, and any dropped, information, whether it's digital or analog, we perceive immediately. We hear it and we go, that's not right. Whereas DMX is fairly slow on its refresh rate, and intermittent interference maybe cause a light to blink or something, and it's just not quite as annoying as a mic drop. It's not good, but I think that mics are held to a much higher standard, and it's also a much more difficult signal to propagate. DMX is a fairly low data signal. When you think about, like, let's talk for a second about DMX over Ethernet, something like ArtNet, for example. When you take Ethernet speeds, and we're not even talking about gigabit, by the way, we're talking about old Ethernet speeds, you can still fit 37,000 DMX universes onto that Cat5. So gives you a sense that, audio is just much more of a priority signal, I think. It's harder to propagate it without any noticeable artifact, whereas wireless DMX is less vulnerable, maybe.
And I know, and another thing that probably would inhibit us from probably seeing even that issue is that I've noticed a lot of the fixtures kind of have if I drop signal, I'm just going to keep doing what I was doing type of thing. Like, I'm not going to suddenly I'm not going to go blackout on you. I'm not going to die on you. I'm just going to keep doing what I was doing. So sometimes we don't even notice it from that standpoint. Like, I know with the uplates that I have, there's been times where I was like I noticed that it was off in the sequence of what was going on with the pattern, but but it was only that there was still light there. So I was like, okay.
Yeah, you're 100% right. I'm actually going to try to really quickly pull up the user's manual for one of the moving lights that I use, because it actually has that feature built in where you can choose. You can say, so what happens when I lose DMX? What do you do? So let's see. Loss of data, page 22. Look at that. So um, I'm going to do a quick screen share here. And we can see right here, loss of data. So it says to set how the product reacts to a loss in control signal or signal data. And it says, you can hold your last signal, just do what you were doing, or you can, black out, So some fixtures give you that option to say, what do you do if you lose signal? What's less objectionable, I guess.
Well, it's good. I mean, that's nice to have that option. Just because, I mean, things happen, right? Even the best plans that we might have, there's always that potential for failure in some form or fashion. So it's just trying to reduce that as much as possible. Um, somebody asked a question here, and maybe you can share on this and maybe not. But Simeon had said, I need help with my Wellstick 180. Is the Wellcom coming out anytime soon?
Yes, they're
And I guess
arriving this week.
they're arriving this week. Okay, so we don't
I
even have to
haven't.
ask this follow-up question.
Yeah. So well, I guess, yeah. I guess I don't know what the follow up question is, but Simeon, I love Simeon, by the way. Good guy. Um, the reason we haven't told anybody yet is because I very, very much, I've been very active in my opinions on the software for the Wellcom, and I very, very much want to get my hands on one and go through it before we tell everybody they're here. Because I really want to know that when we say they're here and the software is what we hoped it would be, what I don't want is for people to get excited that they're here, order them up, and then be disappointed. I'd much rather deal with what do we do with these, 40 Wellcoms we've got in stock, if there's a software update coming or something. So short answer is we should be seeing those very, very soon. They are, I think, on the way. I think they've shipped. I know they're available to ship, and I think they are on the way to us and arriving this week. But I want to play with one and just have a comfort level that it's going to address the things that Simeon and others have asked for with the well sticks. So what's the follow-up question? I'm just curious.
The follow-up question was I think, if this is not the case, would there be a similar substitute that you might recommend? I think to tide over, but if they're
That's a great
coming,
question. No, I don't think tiding over is even the thing. I think that it's a great question because the Wellcom does one thing, which is basically turns your phone into a DMX controller, which is very cool. And again, I've seen some of the software in beta and whatnot. I just want to see the final thing and feel good about that. But yeah, because you could use any WDMX transmitter, and now you could use Show Express or your Kansas or Sound Switch, or at this point now we're back to the realm of universal. You could use any DMX controller to control your well sticks. So I think it's a great follow-up question because you have both options. And there's possibly scenarios where you would even own both. I want simple and I want to run it from my phone, boop, boop, boop. Or I want to do something purposeful that's outside of the constraints of what the Wellcom software will do or won't do. We don't know yet, but so anyway, stay tuned.
There we go. You made Simeon very happy. There's a lot of surprise faces and a big old yes. So I think he's very happy to hear that update. So
Well, let me say this for any of those surprised and happy faces out there besides his. We don't have that many Wellcoms. So if you want to reserve one, pending my testing, you can do that with no obligation. You can say, I want to reserve one, but I'm not going to order. I'm not going to buy it until Ben says he likes it or doesn't. You can make that reservation and get your name on the list, because when these are gone, they're going to be gone again for a while, I'm afraid. So still a chip shortage, and it still sucks.
yeah. Yeah, and that's is to what it is. So that brings up a question then, because obviously there's that issue there. Is there a is there an issue with certain wireless DMX options that are a little bit harder to come by because of the current situation? Um,
They've all been kind of a challenge. I mean, we're
okay,
pretty well stocked now on, like, we've got really good stock on the DeFi kits. Um, WDMX had been very hard for a while because they end of life the Generation 5 and they've just come out with their G6, which, in addition to the Wellcom software, was also one of the things that held back the Wellcom because it uses WDMX. So they're waiting on chips for that too, So um, that was very frustrating. I mean, we were in weekly contact with Sweden where they're made, and almost starting like an international incident. Like get these things over here, you know. So
well that's good. So obviously things happen, and that is what it is. But for lack of better terms, some light towards the end of the tunnel, no pun intended, since we're talking
that was
DMX.
good. That was really good. Yeah.
Thank you, thank you. I try.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're a little easier than others, for those puns.
Yeah,
But
this morning I ended a meeting with several of our department heads by saying we would all be on the same sheet of music, and everybody kind of groaned. But I'm like, hey, that's
um,
and the
all
pun
right.
was
So,
absolutely intended too.
oh, absolutely, absolutely. And if it's not, you still say it is, because then they're gonna go for that. So
That's right. I
um,
did not raise three kids to not have the privilege of using dad jokes.
dad
That
jokes
is
are that they're imperative. You got it. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're a dad or if you're a mom. The cornier, the better the joke that you have. The more you can get somebody to roll their eyes, the better. And yeah, that is key to anything. And yeah,
and I'm
sorry,
wearing
that got me
happy.
thinking of Dano for a moment. So
Well, yeah.
yeah.
Mondays are, well, much is not the same without Dano, that's for sure. Nothing in the industry will ever be the same, I think, without Dano and Neil and Raymar and so many of the great personalities that we've lost, the great friends that we've lost. I think, not to get, deeply personal on this, but, obviously Neil McKinney and I were very close friends, and Dano and I both spoke at Neil's funeral. And it was very shortly after that Dano also passed, and that really, it opened up the other wound with Neil, but it also really hurt because I had just seen him, and we
Mhm.
had just talked about the things we were going to do, and I know a lot of people love Dano, and I think that speaks to who he was, and I mean, as a person, not just as an entertainer, not just as a performer, but who he was in the industry. And
Mhm.
it got me actually thinking. I mean, everybody was wearing disco balls. I wore one certainly at MEX, and it was sort of a conversation. I don't know if I don't think she'll mind if I, say this, but our mutual friend Rachel Lynch and I were talking because she was also close with Dano, and we were really just kind of processing this together. Just a flurry of text messages back and forth, and some teary-eyed phone calls, um, and I sort of mused. I said, "Do you ever wonder what your legacy would be?" And she laughed through tears, but she said probably
Mhm.
pizza. But but I mean, really, you think about that. Like, what are we, what are we really doing, right? So um, I told her, I said, well, at least you'll have one. I don't know what mine would be, but go ahead.
I think it depends. In your words, it depends.
It
Um,
depends. Yeah.
it depends on which circle of those people that are close to you and know you, because you've got so many. Uh, a lot of people think of you as just like this guy that they get gear from, and yet those who start to know you and get to know you recognize that you are extremely multifaceted, and you have so many different layers of direction that you're involved in, that I think your legacy will be dependent upon who that person is, and that experience they
I
had.
think we're all complex beings, though. You're a math teacher, but that's not who you are. That's one of the things that you do. And certainly I know you as a friend and as an individual. And I know that I think most of us are like that, though. I think most of
Mhm.
us are not just the one thing. And um, yeah, I mean, it was just an interesting introspective, where we thought about, where these people we knew, these friends, these um, forces in the industry, that now we feel there's a bit of an emptiness, there's a bit of a vacuum. Certainly my graphics for this show has never been the same since Jimmy DePalma passed away. And I mean, not that that's that's Jimmy's legacy, but it's just one of the things he was just so extraordinarily good at, right? So yeah, I think all of us are. It's interesting you say. I'm sort of fumbling for a point, but yeah, I love that I can help people with gear, and I love that I can help people with their gear questions. But to your point, I'm also a human.
Mhm.
I'm a father, a husband, sports fan. I mean, pick. We're all a lot of things, right? And that's one of the things I valued the most is the human connection of the last 30 years in the industry, and hopefully my next 30. But
Mhm.
I've really enjoyed getting to know the people, not just their gear. Although I probably do know their gear.
Just a little, just a little. Well, we are coming down towards the end. So in the time that we've got here remaining, um, what I'd like to kind of pose is, we've talked about some of those entry points and those pieces that you have, and obviously what you get depends upon what you have. Um, so is there any kind of, make sure you think of this type of last nugget to throw in there?
I guess I would say understand your application and ask the questions before you buy the gear. I can't tell you how many times I see it on forums, or even people will message me and say, "So I just bought this. What do you think of that?" I'm like, "Well, I think you just bought it. That's what I think." Especially if you just bought it from somebody else. What do you want me to do about it? Yeah, it's not even I don't even have the option of saying, of putting a pause on your order. It's saying, "Well, let's
Yeah.
talk about it before it goes." I mean, it's are you seeking validation at that point, or you just want a pat on the back saying you did good, or do you really want my answer because you might not like it? It puts me in a very tough spot because I'm so committed to integrity.
Hmm.
So I think that's one thing, and I don't know. I guess, like I said, understand the application, and then we're going to talk through those other things. Do you have something that's already wireless? What are you trying to accomplish? What do you want to do? Why do you want to go wireless? I mean, I get it. I mean, no strings is convenient, right? I mean, I saw Pinocchio, like 4 versions of it, but sometimes wired is better, but I use wireless frequently too. So anyway, so that's a really complicated, it depends kind of answer, right?
Something you hit in the beginning that we got to circle back to before we run out of time. You brought up about the ILS
Mm-hmm.
and how that's not why it's not a wireless DMX type of situation. It's more software. So what are we dealing with for that? Like, I mean, these fixtures, what are you sending to one? Is it doing everything for you? Do you need the extra pieces?
I
Oh, look
I
at that. He's got a graphic right there.
I put together a couple graphics, yeah. So if my friends from Chevet are watching, you're welcome. So you know, I'll say this: I'm proud to be a Chevet dealer, and I'm proud that NLFX has won 3 Chevet Dealer of the Year awards. But I'm not a paid influencer. I'm not getting any extra whatever for doing this. So, but I will also say, Albert Chevet, if you're watching, I'm not opposed to it. So, I mean, cash at me. You won't. All right. So anyway, no, I think we have a great relationship with Chevet, and I think they've come out with something really pretty cool here. And the whole concept is that it starts with the gig bar move ILS, and right now that's the only way that this starts. But within the gig bar move ILS, which is what you see on your screen, um, you have basically the brains of a lighting controller, something that's designed to basically run the lighting for you. And there's some really fantastic control options. You have up to 50 channels of DMX control within this thing too, which is pretty cool. But you also have this remote, and it's about time that they did this, by the way. Which is my annotation tool here. So this remote down here is RF. You can see this tiny little divot here. Well, that's an antenna that would stick out. And well, it's about time because now you don't have to actually just point it at the thing. You can use it and it'll transmit the signal via radio wave. But picture this is like the brains of the operation, as it were. And then you've got these other ILS fixtures, and there are many available right now and many more coming. I've been privy to some of the behind the scenes stuff, and it's pretty wild. I actually cost myself a sale today because somebody asked me about something, and I said, yeah, just wait a month. Just Just cool it for a month. Why? Can't tell you. Just take my word for it or don't. Your choice. Anyway, so what we can see, these are ILS enabled fixtures, and here we have a wash similar to a par. Here we have a moving head, and here we have kind of a party in a box. We've got bring up my annotation tool again here. We've got these color mixing elements. We've got effect light things coming out of here. We've got a laser in the middle. These are like all strobes. So this thing does a whole bunch of different things. And what's really cool is that all of this is now working together. So when the strobes up here go off, the strobes here go off. When the moving head does something, the moving head here does something, and you can tell it where these are relationally, fixture 1, 2, 3, or 4, so it knows where you want it to respond. So you can have some cool kind of complementary crossing beams, things like that, things that it really looks like you spent some time on your light show. When the wash lights are doing something, then the wash lights are doing something. When the effect lights are doing something, then the effect lights are doing something. And then of course, you've got your laser. And it's nice too, because you say, well, I don't want a laser going during my first dance or my wedding. You've got some ability to control that. And they keep updating the firmware actually, which is pretty cool. There's a new version of the firmware out. You can stick a USB stick in the back of the gig bar move, and it updates the firmware, and you add functionality so you can, get a little bit more specific and purposeful looks without actually having to use DMX or doing any programming. Now, I love DMX and I find it very easy, but I'm sure that probably got a bunch of groans and head slaps. So if DMX isn't your bag, this is a pretty cool thing. It's very easy to use. So how this works basically is we've got our effect light or any light, our moving head, or any of these. There's a lot of them, and we have a couple different options. You can see that we have DMX on board here. And we also have this USB port. Now this is different than the USB port on the gig bar move. This is only for Chevet's D-Fi USB. It's just a small wireless USB powered DMX receiver. So maybe a picture will help. Let's try that. So here we can see there's my USB powered wireless DMX receiver. I just plug it into this port, or I could take a wireless DMX receiver of any kind or a DMX cable and plug it into here. Now, where this is keyly different from wireless DMX is that ILS is either wired or wireless. There is a wireless transmitter built into the gig bar move, but there is not in these fixtures. So in order to use that with the fixtures, you would need to run a DMX cable. But you can also use the built-in wireless with the wireless DMX receivers to transmit ILS. So they're complementary but different, if that makes sense.
So when you see the ILS on those other fixtures, not on the gig bar, but on those other fixtures, it has the capability of taking the thinking that's being sent it and knows what to do with it, not entirely wireless standalone type of thing. Now, just out of curiosity, with those fixtures that are built into this, do they come with a receiver?
They do not.
They do not. Okay, so that's something that obviously you want to know about if you're going to go that route. So
yeah, you would have to use the Chevet D-Fi compatible receivers. There's a couple different options, 3 I think to be exact. But you could also use a cable. But it's important to note that the ILS is only available on ILS compatible fixtures. If you have a non-ILS enabled Chevet moving head, that's not going to work with the ILS. Or if you have another brand, that's not going to work. You have to have the ILS enabled in order to use the ILS protocol. It is a patent pending proprietary standard that is different. And again, it's sort of a simplified way to run neat, complex looking light shows without doing any programming. And if you want to learn more about ILS, please contact any of us here at NLFX. Happy to talk to you about it. We demonstrated it at the MEX show. So it is sort of a replacement for DMX in a simplified form, but it does not replace DMX and what DMX can do, which is very individualized, specific, granular control capability.
I think it's great that a lot of these brand companies are trying to help for lack of a better term, someone like me who has enough knowledge of DMX to make it do some things, but when it comes to making a complex show, it's going to take me way more time than what I really want to spend with it. So
Well,
having
it's maybe
something
not
like that,
necessary. You know, if you're like, look, I
well,
just want to rock a
yeah,
school dance. I don't want to program the lights. I just want them to do something that sort of makes sense. ILS, I think, is a great way for you to achieve smart, cohesive, looking shows without putting in all that time and effort.
there we go, there we go.
But we're not going to see ILS at concerts. I mean, those
Yeah.
things are still going to be programmed. So everything's got its place. And
Hmm.
here again, just because I have ILS enabled fixtures doesn't mean I won't use DMX with them, right? I think having both options is really important.
Now, yeah, we got a quick moment for this question. Um, because I suddenly it's like you mentioned it has the DMX control, right? If
Mm-hmm.
I DMX to the ILS gig bar
Mm-hmm.
and I connect it to ILS fixture, compatible fixture, right? I make it. If I control the one, will it sync it to the other one? If I tell the moving head on the gig bar to do something, will it then tell the moving head that is the ILS fixture with all the connected pieces connected? Or since I went DMX, do I have to do DMX to that?
That's a really good question. I don't know. I think I'm going to have to look at the DMX profile on the gig bar move, and I have not tried that. Let's just look together.
Okay.
It seems like a
And
thing that.
whenever the 10 o'clock show is, I'm sorry guys, we're talking good stuff here. And I posed a question and Ben went, I don't know. I think I just won like the award for tonight. I didn't think that was possible.
Well, so like many people, I don't know things, but I'm going to find out. That's my thing. So, all right. I, I maybe a better way to answer that question is I don't know yet.
Okay.
So let's all learn together.
Let's call Jeff Short up right now.
He
I'm kidding.
probably would know.
That's true.
I,
That's true. He might. He might.
I would be disappointed if Jeff didn't know. All right, so let's go to the. You'll notice here, like I said, here's your different DMX channels. Let's go to the 50 channel and let's just see. Here we can see all of our control for the pars. We might have to look actually at our menu control. So here we can see we're getting into our automatic programs. Okay, DeFi transmit.
So it sounds like you can turn on the transmit.
Yep. Yeah, you would obviously want to be able to turn on or off
So
your radio. Hmm.
this is something I think we need to get some experimenting going.
Yeah, it's this is something cool too, by the way, this bind feature. This allows you to enable one remote to control that fixture, so you don't have to worry about accidental control. You can also
Mm.
make it a common, so you can say, hey, I want any remote to do it. But yeah, that's kind of a cool thing. So okay, so DeFi channel. I'm kind of the opinion that probably not, because I have a feeling you're probably in ILS mode or DMX mode. Um, but I don't know. And I don't really see a clear answer here. Oh, this is cool too, by the way. You can change, depending on what the fixtures you're linking with it, you can tell your pars that, they're supposed to emulate, if they're a hex, they could emulate a try. That way you're not making colors on one light that the other light can't match, which is pretty cool. And look at here. Let's see. Oh, yeah, sound lost. We can tell what to do if you lose the sound. So that's cool. Like we were talking about with the data earlier, DMX. Yeah, I don't know. answer might be right in front of me, but that's not something I've tried. You know,
Well,
we've
and I think it's that idea might be a little bit different in out of the box thinking. I mean, in the same respect, like if you're connecting to this, why would you necessarily? But in the same respect, if it works as a transmitter, I see an application for it, but I also see where it might not be something that would be um explicitly maybe written into the manual, just because it is a little different from that standpoint.
Well, I would imagine you can certainly use the Gig Bar Move ILS as your transmitter since it has a DFI transmit a transceiver in on board. I would totally believe that you could use it to broadcast your wireless DMX.
Mhm.
I just don't know if it would do it via ILS. You know,
Yeah, I'm just thinking like if I program that, if it would automatically then, like if I wanted the par to do its thing, if it'd make the par do, like we talked about the pars, or if the strobe didn't make the other strobe do its thing, like, kind of that same idea, or if it
mm-hmm.
is more working off the remote or slash foot switch option is what then makes it go.
Yeah. Hmm.
Hmm. All
Well,
right.
on that note, I'm going to have more pie.
That sounds like a wonderful, wonderful idea. So hopefully you enjoyed yourself. Hopefully you got figured out a few things related to wireless DMX. There's definitely some things that you want to consider, but ideally, if you are getting started and going down this path, the first thing you need to begin it with is what are you using and what's your plan for it.
Mhm.
And then from there, talk to Ben or one of his crew, and they will be able to set you up with the best piece that's going to fit with what you're trying to do for it. Assuming that it's possible, right? If my cockamamie idea it's not possible, then they can't. But beyond that, they'd probably figure out another way to make it like that. So I'm sure there's ways. But Ben, thank you very much for tonight. Thank you for allowing me to join you on Tuesday night. And John, I believe we'll be back next week for whatever might be in store for that. But in the meantime, any parting words?
Go eat pie.
Go eat pie. There we go. How about it?